Hey guys, good morning. Sorry we missed you at SHOT Show, but it was quite the eventful week. And if you want to check out the world's worst Facebook Live, you go to Outdoor Life, you'll see me for about 18 minutes, including a very close up on my eyeball. So I urge you all to go check that out because it is really embarrassing. But we are here in the galleries this morning, and I do want to point out for all the people that have commented on our heights, I have high heels on today.
And I'm kind of
slouching. So we're working on making our heights a little bit less
noticeable.
noticeable. Yeah,
Sure.
We're working on it. It's not going to be successful, but I'm trying. But today we wanted to talk about U.S. Marshall pistols, and I'm sure everyone heard the big news about SIG getting the contract last week with the Army, and so we decided we would roll back in history a little bit and talk about some of the Marshall pistols we have in the museum, including our earliest ones, and then we'll go up a little bit into the Civil War, and depending on how bored you are and the time, we might take you into World War I a little bit. But today, Danny is the star of the show, so I'm going to let Danny talk about our North and Cheneys and our Harper's Ferries.
All right, guys. If you see anything in the background or have some questions while we're talking, be sure to ask them in a comment, and hopefully Jesse will tell us and let us know we have a question.
If you see someone in the galleries behind us, you should probably let us know because we're close.
Yeah, if you see that.
Let us know about that one. It's kind of scary.
So the first pistol we're going to talk about today is our 1799 North and Cheney in the case here. This has the distinction of being the first officially adopted pistol by the U.S. military. The U.S. government had established arsenals in the early 1790s, but those were mostly focused on producing long arms. And so in the late 1790s, they put out a contract for pistols to commercial manufacturers, civilian manufacturers, and this is the first one that was approved by the government. And they approved an order for 500 initially to be produced by a guy named Simeon North, who is also credited with inventing milling machines, which was pretty important for the production of interchangeable parts that would happen shortly thereafter in government arsenals. It's a 69 caliber smoothbore pistol. It's based off the French model 1777 pistol, much like our musket was based. Our standard issue musket then, the 1795, was based on an earlier French design. So was the pistol. This one is serial number 121 out of that first order of 500. There was a second order for 1,500, bringing the contract total to 2,000. And in reading yesterday, I found that the original cost for the contract was $6.50 per pistol. I don't know what the SIG contract is per pistol, but it's probably not. It's not $6.50 per pistol. So that's our first U.S. military adopted pistol, the Simeon North and Cheney.
Alicia Cheney.
What?
Alicia Cheney. I was telling you the first name. Sorry, my bad. I'm just going to back out now. I'm going to go get some coffee.
All right, so the next pistol we're going to talk about is our Harper's Ferry Model 1805, another flintlock pistol. This one has the distinction of being the first one produced in a government arsenal. So it was produced at Harper's Ferry Arsenal, one of the two that the government had set up in the 1790s. It is styled kind of similarly to the Model 1803 rifle, also produced at Harper's Ferry. They're both half-stocked, and they both have a metal rib where the cleaning rod, or the ramrod goes, excuse me. This one, as you may be able to read on the label, is serial number 252 out of 4,096. They were produced, 4,000 were produced, but they only issued them in sets, so they actually issued 2,000 sets. So each of these pistols would have a pair. We do not have the mate for this one. We just have half of the pair, which is unfortunate. The lock plate is dated 1807, and even though that seems like it's 2 years into production, the first year I think they only produced, it's debated, but they produced somewhere between 8 and maybe 20 or 30. There's some debate about that, but they didn't produce very many that first year, so most of them are dated 1807. And this would be in service for the War of 1812 and thereafter, and but has a distinction of being the first arsenally produced U.S. Army pistol. And then above that one, we have the model 1807, 1817. Now, those of you who are familiar with collecting might recognize that kind of designation as normally denoting that's when the pistol was updated from a previous configuration. However, it's a little different on this one. So they began producing this pistol in 1807, but they quickly decided that they didn't like it. and the Army preferred the Harper's Ferry, the 1805. So they halted production, and they took the parts and they put them in a warehouse. They put them in storage and kind of forgot about it for about a decade. And then they realized, hey, we have all these parts. Let's turn them into pistols. So without a lot of demand or reason, they assembled these, the parts they had before. They finished making some parts to assemble them. And they even used leftover locks from rifle production to build these pistols. And because they didn't have much use for them, they sat in storage, and they appear in an arsenal inventory unissued as late as 1850. So sat in storage for something like 30 odd years. It was a 69 caliber as opposed to the 54 caliber of the Harper's Ferry. It's a smooth bore, though I forgot to mention Harper's Ferry is also a smooth bore, although there are at least 2 examples of the Harper's Ferry that were rifled, including one in the Smithsonian collection, which we don't have a rifled one. Sad face.
We do.
We do?
Well, the Smithsonian does. Sorry, wasn't listening. My bad, y'all.
Is that the one that's on loan?
Yeah, it's on loan for the
So
Smithsonian.
we have one on loan from the Smithsonian that is rifled.
If you want to see information on that, if you go to the Smithsonian's website, they have an online collection, and it's the Edwin Bitter collection. It's a great U.S. Marshal pistol collection. We have from the Smithsonian. There's a 1799 first contract that hung in Kennedy's Oval Office. We also have a rifled 1805, and so there's a lot of those that you can see online at the Smithsonian's website, or you can come here and see it. And I'm gonna put a plug in that I wrote all the information on that online catalog back when I worked at the Smithsonian. But it really is a cool collection, Edwin Bitter, and there's books on it, and pretty much every Marshall pistol you could ever want from that time period, it's there. All right, moving on.
Moving on. So
We're going
those are
this
our
way.
early ones. We're headed this way through our gallery.
So you get to
Check
like
out.
video some movement. Look at all the guns.
We're skipping a lot of pistols because there's only so many flintlocks we can talk about at once.
Oh yes.
That one. So here we have some of our Civil War era firearms. You'll notice some Colts, Savage.
Sorry. I shouldn't be allowed in these videos. It's really.
The joys of being live. So the Army kept with single shots for a long time. The latest single shot was actually adopted after the Civil War in the rolling block, which we have in the next case down there. But they even adopted, is it in this case? It's back in that case. They even adopted the model 1855, which was a percussion single shot pistol. And those of you that know Colt history will know that revolvers had been around for a number of years, even by the 1855. What? Decades. And so, but they still adopted single shots, even though revolvers were available. Some of the first revolvers that the Army adopted were Colt revolvers, including the, I don't know if they had an official contract for the 51, did they? I can't think off the top of my head. I don't think so.
51 is best known as Colt's first commercially successful.
So, one of the first military successful Colts was the 1860 Army, which we have over here. The Colt produced over 150,000 of these pistols, and almost 130,000 of them were purchased by the...
Which one?
This one. Were purchased by the Army during the Civil War until the Colt factory caught on fire and burned and halted production. And then the Army began purchasing more of its competitor, the Remington 58. You'll notice this one has a shoulder stock, a little bit unusual feature, but was available at the time. And then to its right and lower, we have a 1861, and I will let Ashley talk about this one a little bit.
So this gun that we've got is a Colt Model 1861 Navy, but if you can see the giant label, it says serial number 1. This is serial number 1, and we've got, it's hard kind of to see it down here, but if you look at the photograph, we've got all the serial numbers line up. And we also know that the staff wrote at April 9th, 1861, the date of its construction underneath the grip strap. And so we have that bit of information. And we also know who it belonged to. And if you look on this photograph, this is on the strap, and that's Private Caleb Slate, Charles T. Slate. And he was a private in a New York Yonkers regiment Regiment. Now, this Colt Model 1861, while they've made over 100,000, the first run was made with a fluted cylinder. So I know a lot of people are used to in the 61 the Texas Naval engraved seam that you'll see on the cylinder. This one is fluted, and it also, we know that at some point between April 9th, its manufacture, and I believe it's May 21st, 1861, when Caleb Slate was enlisting in the New York Yonkers Regiment. He purchased the firearm for use. It was his personal sidearm. And then we know that it followed him throughout his time during the Civil War, but he was medically discharged in 62. It was most notably used at the Second Bull Run. And after that, like gun history goes, we usually lose track of where they went, but it did end up at an auction here not too long ago, a handful of years ago, and was put on loan to us at the museum. So it's a wonderful specimen of a 61 Navy, although it doesn't necessarily look exactly like many of the 61 Navies you typically see.
So we have a question from Tom, who asks how we know if the stock for the 60 Army was purchased with the gun or something purchased separately, and that was an option available from the factory with a gun. So a customer could order it, say I want a shoulder stock on my gun, and they could order it like that. Now, I'm not sure if this particular one matches the gun. I'd have to look that up, and once the video is over, I'll go and I'll check that one out and leave it as a comment if this one actually matches the gun it's with, because later on they could end up getting switched around.
Yeah, because the serial number's not the same. Sorry, hey.
This one's a mismatch.
Mismatch. Thanks, Winchester.
So, do you want to talk about our later pistols and Savage briefly?
Well, we could do a little walk and see what we've got. Marshall pistols are kind of quite a diverse history on them. And once we get into more contemporary period, that's not really my time period, so I don't want to speak too heavily on them. But we do have a Savage that we wanted to point out here, a model 1907, and we competed with the Colt for the government contract. Didn't get it.
Much like many of our modern companies just lost out.
But the Savage is a really interesting gun. If you've seen it recently, Buffalo Bill carried one. And there's been one that's been up on auction several times in recent years, that even though he was a man of the Wild West, he was also a man that liked a nice semi-auto. And he purchased, owned, and used a Savage Model 1907.
Pretty neat.
Yeah. While we're standing here, I want to point out one really cool gun that we've got. Don't get a curator in the gallery because we'll get like ADD, which is that this Springfield Model 1873, so the second one in from over here, belonged to Frederick Remington, the artist. We have the Remington Studio Collection. So it's not a Lifelet, it's Frederick Remington, the artist, and we have a lot of his guns throughout the entire museum, but we have his entire studio collection. And so, in addition to the Springfield, we've got one of his Winchesters that he took hunting. We've got a lot of beautifully embellished guns. A lot of artists would take these types of guns because they were depicting military scenes and use them as props in their art. And so this is one of the ones that he used as part of his art. And the 1873 Trapdoor was a breech-loading, government-issued gun. That was one of the first ones. I believe it was breech-loading in our history, and it's certainly a really popular firearm that you see.
So those are some of our U.S. Marshall military pistols. Hope you enjoyed the video. If you have any more questions, comment. I'll kind of keep my eye on it today to answer those questions. And yeah, if you see something you want to know about, even not our Marshall pistol, we'll let you ask questions about anything.
We won't. It's not allowed. But what we're going to be doing now, starting this week since we're standing in the galleries, is between now and the summer, we're going to bring a lot of Facebook Lives where we go into the galleries and we show you some gems in the cases. Because if you notice, there's a lot of guns in the cases, but there are gems in every single one of them. And so we'll kind of start to point out some things so that if you come to the museum this summer, maybe you will start to pick out things that you've never seen before.
And come to the museum this summer.
100th anniversary, Buffalo Bill Center of the West.
All right, thanks for watching, guys.
Have a good weekend.